culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
One of the things people love about you is you speak your mind and you don't use a politician's filter. However, that is not without its downsides, in particular when it comes to women. You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
CNN plus Fox plus MSNBC equals CIA plus NSA. Welcome to the Savage Nation. It's clear now that Mayhem Kelly is working for the other side. It's clear now that Martha Washington and Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch are working for Hillary Clinton. It's as clear as a bell that Mayhem Kelly has gone over to the dark side. And frankly, her looks are changing. It's the portrait of Dorian Kelly. The more she sells out, the wider her nostrils have become. Listen to what I just said to you. Have you seen them flare? This woman was once pretty. And the more she has sold out, the wider her nostrils have become. They're almost porcine. She snorts her insults at America. And as I say, it's now the portrait of Dorian Kelly, not the portrait of Dorian Gray. And I have a question for Martha Washington. Why did Martha Washington keep the one woman, Republican candidate, Carly Fiorina, off the main stage? Why did she relegate Carly Fiorina to the, let's say, the sideshow? Miss Feminist Mayhem Kelly? And by the way, how come there was not one question from Brett Baer, who I thought was a journalist, aimed at the damage that Obama has done and what these Republican candidates would do to undo the damage that Obama has done? And by the way, how come the great journalist Brett Baer did not ask one question about Benghazi? And by the way, how come there was not one question about the damage that Hillary Clinton has done as Secretary of State? And by the way, and by the way, and by the way, and by the way, Kelly used the same Democrat tactic she once attacked. She used the war on women canard, which she put down in the past. In the past, Megyn Kelly, who I now call Mayhem Kelly, called it a so-called war on women. She was critical of the so-called war on women. Now it's suddenly a real war on women. The fact of the matter is, I don't think it affected Trump negatively. The fact of the matter is that the more Fox attacks him, the worse Fox looks. Their ratings may be up, but their credibility is down. And by the way, there was bigger news than the debate last night. You know what the news was? Charles Schumer, certifiable liberal Democrat senator in New York City, turned on Obama. Charles Schumer did the right thing. Charles Schumer listened to his conscience. Charles Schumer listened to his conscience and used his big brain and realized that the deal with Iran is a sellout for America and Israel. And I want to salute Charles Schumer. And those of you who say it's a cynical move because he knows Obama will overcome the veto, I'm not so sure, number one. And number two, don't assume that Schumer did this simply out of a Machiavellian, from a Machiavellian perspective. Many years ago, I opposed the Dubai port deal, something that my loyalist listeners know about. And do you know that Charles Schumer came on this program because he actually worked to stop Bush from turning over port security to our good friends in Dubai? Do you remember that situation? So Schumer probably has principle when it comes to things of this large nature. Nevertheless, let's go back to politics as usual. The issue is not Trump, it's Mayhem Kelly. The issue is not Trump, it's Meatball Jr. The issue is not Trump, it's Brett Baer, who's destroyed himself as a journalist. And the issue now is, why is it that MSNBC and CNN are gloating over how well Fox did last night in the debate? Why is it that radical libs like Frank Bruni of the New York Times loved the debate? Why is it that every anti-American, progressive lout in the United States of America loved what Fox News did to the Republicans last night? And incidentally, you know, Marshall McLuhan, who was the genius on the media, wrote a book or an essay many years ago called The Medium is the Message. And we all learned from that. The minute the cameras opened up on the stage, I knew it was a setup. Before one word was uttered from Mayhem Kelly, I knew it was a setup. Why did I say that? Because who was stage left, most prominently displayed for the world to see amongst all the Republican candidates? It was the overweight Chris Christie. his waistline was exemplified. So they set the whole thing up. But how much further do you have to go than the fact that there was a big F on the stage, on the screen, throughout the whole thing? It was Mark Zuckerberg. Mr. Undershirt was behind the whole thing. When have you ever heard of a man in favor of cheapening American wages and flooding America with illegal aliens, buying a network during the opposition's debates? When have you ever heard of this? Well, you just heard of it. What do you think the F stood for? Mark Zuckerberg joined forces with Fox News to undermine one Donald Trump and be the entire Republican ticket. And that was for one reason only. Because Zuckerberg is the greediest man in the history of the world. Zuckerberg wants cheap labor. Zuckerberg doesn't care who gets hurt. Zuckerberg just wants them in this country. And so, that's why Trump is the biggest threat to the status quo. The establishment is afraid of Donald Trump. I don't know whether Trump will be able to survive all of these attacks. I mean, he can survive it verbally, but can he survive it emotionally? A man who has been on top this long, a man who has always been able to defeat his opposition through his brains and his brawn, can only take so much rejection, especially when you have been accepted for so long. I have been on the outside for so long that it's starting to look like up to me. You got to understand, I've been vilified for 21 years on the radio for saying the very same things that Donald Trump's been saying recently on immigration. You could call me a pioneer in this regard. I did it long before Rush Limbaugh even knew how to spell the word. And the fact of the matter is, I have paid plenty for it. But I'm still here. But I got to tell you something. It's not easy being an outsider, but I've lived with it so long that it becomes, as I say to you, a way of life. I don't think Donald Trump can withstand the psychological, how shall I put it, pressure of being an outsider, because he's been an insider so long, and rightly so. Look what he's achieved. Look at the beautiful buildings he's built, incidentally. Look at the beautiful buildings he's built. Look at the golf courses he's built. He's produced stuff on the earth, as opposed to the journalists like Mayhem Kelly. So the Rad Libs love Mayhem. Mayhem is now their Martha Washington. Or shall I say their Mata Hari. She thinks she's Martha Washington for the Republicans, or shall I say the so-called conservatives who watch Fox News, but she really is now Mata Hari for the Democrats. Frank Bruni, New York Times loved her. MSNBC loved her. CNN loved her. They went after every Republican candidate, tooth and claw, and they didn't say one word about Obama. And what's interesting to me is that Bill Hemmer is a better journalist than all of those on the main stage. I don't know if you saw the first hour of the debates last night where the so-called second-tier candidates were grilled, let's say, and it was by a different group than Megyn Kelly and her hit team. The fact of the matter is that they were asked real questions, and one of the key questions that the so-called second-tier Republicans was asked struck me as very valid. And it was set up against Obama, as it should have been. And here's what I think Bill Hemmer said. He said to Carly Fiorina and the others, one of the first things that Barack Obama did upon taking office 6 years ago was write an executive order doing so forth and so on. What would your first executive order be, if there was one, if you became president? That was a valid question because it set things up the way we, the listeners, know they should have been set up. We know Obama's a damaging influence. So all of them gave a very intelligent answer, frankly. They were all, anyone on the second tier, by the way, anyone on the first tier for that matter, would be a good president, incidentally, with the exception of a few who I'll get to. I think a few of them have shot themselves, done permanent damage. And I would say the number one damage last night, now that I'm moving into that category, I didn't mean to get there, was Curly. Curly shot himself in the foot. You know who I mean, don't you, Robert? You shook your head. The minute I said Curly, where'd that Curly come from? They gave him a perm for this. He's nuts. Who gave the guy it's like the Three Stooges. One of them was Curly, Moe, and Shemp, or whatever. This guy looked like Curly. Like Zany. He actually acted out his role of Mr. Zany. Cruz was a winner, big winner. Rational, smart, stood up to the insults and assaults, but he can't win. By the way, I'm telling you point blank, he just doesn't have the looks and the demeanor to win. I'm sorry. I'm an expert at these things. And the reason everyone's rallying behind Trump is because he does have the ability to win. And by the way, where are the debates on the Democrat side? Answer, there are none. Oh, and by the way, the most telling event of the night occurred right after the debate, when flared nostril Kelly did a special interview, which we have for you, and nobody else in the media seems to have seen it. But flared nostril Kelly was apparently told who to talk to right after the debates by Mark Zuckerberg. And wait until you listen on the Savage Nation.
What did you think?
Well, I'll tell you, after watching this debate tonight, I'm confident, more confident than ever, that the Democratic nominee will eventually become President of the United States. And I sort of feel for my counterpart, Reince Priebus, because it's pretty clear why they did everything they could to shrink the number of debates and shrink the exposure.
Be specific, like what was it that jumped out at you?
Well,
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust to protect my wealth with gold and silver. Call 800-BUICOIN.
Well, if I go by Drudge, which is a great group of people, or if I go by Time Magazine, I have to give myself an A. Or if I go by the New York Times, the front page of the New York Times, I have to give myself an A.
How did I know that?
No, I was happy with the performance. I didn't know if I'd do well. I could. You know what? If I didn't,
Right,
I'd say I got a D, I got an F.
On the debate, and of course, if he went before the Savage Nation, he'd get an A. What more do you need to know than MSNBC and CNN and all of the other fronts for the CIA and the FBI love the debate because they try to smear Donald Trump and the entire Republican Party? What do you need to know? When the midstream media loves what Mayhem Kelly tried to do and loves what Bret Baier did to his own career, we're not even mentioning Meatball Jr., who put on glasses to look intelligent, Charles Sauerkraut Hammer's sidekick. We're not mentioning Meatball Jr. because he didn't even show up on the scales. Charles Sauerkraut Hammer, I don't know what he's doing on Fox. Actually, I do know now. I always wondered why Charles Sauerkraut Hammer was on Fox News. Now I know why. Because he is Fox News. He hates Republicans. That's why Sauerkraut Hammer is on Fox News. Fiorina was good. I loved Ben Carson. I mean, he can't win. The guy is so smart. It's painful to watch him standing around the other people. Never forget who Ben Carson is. He's a pediatric neurosurgeon. You can't fake that. That's not community organizing. Pediatric neurosurgery is not the same as community organizing. You actually have to cut open skulls and fix the brains of children and babies. It's not community organizing. You can't use Al Sharpton in the surgical ward when you're opening up the brain of a baby. Ben Carson is as good as they get in the human family. I only wish there was a place for him somewhere on the Major League ticket. But okay, that's not the main story. You know what the main story is. The main story is that rad libs loved Kelly. The main story is that Megyn Kelly's credibility is completely shot, irrespective of how big her ratings may be and whether she gets patted on the, I'm sorry, it's a family show, patted on the shoulder by Roger Ailes and Murdoch, and she gets a raise for drawing so much attention and satisfying Mark Zuckerberg so well. She may even get an invitation to fly on Mark Zuckerberg's jet out to California to visit the Facebook factory and to see how her work has helped repress wages so that illegal aliens can continue to flow into America and work for Zuckerberg. I mean, this is what it's all about, follow the money. There's nothing new under the sun. And I don't mean to be seen as misogynistic when I say things that the more she sells out, the wider her nostrils have become. But she's starting to look like that fellow, the congressman who's no longer in the Democrat Party, whose nostrils widened the longer he became a progressive. And the bigger progressive he became, the wider his nostrils became. It's something that you cannot control. And I am saying I saw it happening, the snorting. In fact, if you were to take Megyn Kelly's nose off of her face and remove it from her face, I'm doing something very important because I said to you, McLuhan taught me this. The medium is the message. If you were to Photoshop Megyn Kelly's nose off of her face, look at it in the beginning of her career, meaning at Fox, Look at the size of her nostrils now. Look at the size of her nostrils last night. Now continue to Photoshop that nostril, that nose. And I want you to go back to an early cartoon of Beavis and Butthead. It was reminiscent of Beavis's nose. One of my assistants who's in his 20s is laughing, and this guy never laughs at anything. So, yeah, she really stepped in it, and I don't care how much money she makes. She used the same damn tactic she once attacked the war on women. Poor little women. Poor little defenseless women. And then right after it was over, Zuckerberg probably told her who to talk to. She talks to the worst woman in the history of humanity. None other than the most vile woman I've ever seen in politics. I mean, I don't mind Democrats. They could be this, that. Boxer I despise because of her support for infanticide. But this one? Wasserwoman Schultz from Florida? Debbie Wasserwoman Schultz is the archetypical. I better be careful. There's a new phrase for Debbie Wasserwoman Schultz. There's nothing that could supersede her name itself. Her name itself has become a noun. That's what it's become. Person, place, a thing, right? Well, it is a noun. No, her name has become a verb, which is, it's a verb for something that you can't even describe better than by saying Wasserman Schultz. That's a new verb for vile. It's longer, I admit. So Kelly goes and interviews Wasserwoman Schultz and asks Wasserwoman Schultz what she thought. Robert, play it now.
What did you think?
Well, I'll tell you, after watching this debate tonight, I'm confident, more confident than ever, that the Democratic nominee will eventually become President of the United States. And I sort of feel for my counterpart, Reince Priebus, because it's pretty clear why they did everything they could to shrink the number of debates and shrink the exposure.
Right, that's unbelievable. The Democrats have no debates at all. None. Hillary is silent because she's so indictable. And look who Kelly talks to.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE. Savage.
No, that is not Megyn Kelly and Wasserwoman Schultz after the debates. That is the Beavis and Butthead cartoon from many years ago. But I'm bringing it up for a reason. Look, I'm a student of literature. And in the Victorian era, Oscar Wilde wrote a great play entitled The Portrait of Dorian Gray. Those of you who know literature know what I'm referring to. And it was about a distinguished, good-looking man, and as he became corrupt later on in life, his face changed, but he didn't know it was changing, and he only saw it in a portrait that was painted of himself. And I am telling you that Mayhem Kelly is the portrait of Dorian Kelly. And the more she has sold out, the wider her nostrils have become. In fact, my assistant during the break did take her nose in the beginning of her career at Fox, remove it, put it on the screen, then took her nose last night, put it on the screen to the right. Then to the right of that, we put the Beavis and Butthead cartoon, and I'm correct. The further she has gone to the left, Martha Washington, the wider her nostrils have become. And she used the same propagandist tactics that she once attacked. She once sneered at the so-called war on women, saying it was a tactic used by the Democrats. Last night, she didn't use the word so-called. Suddenly, she was an injured little woman, identifying with all the downtrodden women. And she didn't ask one damn question about ISIS. She didn't ask one question of any substance. It was a hit piece from the get-go. And I got to tell you something. Women were so turned off by Kelly, you wouldn't believe it. Women were turned off by what she did. You see, women can see through women. Forget about good looks and the hair and the nails. They looked at her and they said they couldn't believe what this woman was doing. And the giveaway was right after the debate, the fake debate. She interviews one of the most horrendous human beings on the earth, Wasserwoman Schultz of the DNC, or whatever she does now for the party, and asks her what she thought about it and gives her a stage to say, well, this proves that the Democrats are going to win. This proves that the Republicans are finished. This is a debate? It was a gigantic infomercial for Hillary Clinton funded by Facebook. Write it down. It was an infomercial for Hillary Clinton. And what's sickening here is that not one question was asked about Benghazi. Not one question was asked about the Clinton cash. Not one question was asked about her tragic relationship with the world as Secretary of State and how she messed up the entire world with her so-called Arab Spring. It's astounding that this went on.